Alright, what is up, everybody? Welcome to a brand new year of lore readings, man. It's exciting. Hope you guys have all been well. I hope you guys have been enjoying these as much as I've been enjoying doing them. So, that being said, let's jump right into it. So, this is Chapter 1, The Bright Sword. This is in the new Magic the Gathering event crossover that they have, which is pretty cool. I think it's awesome that they're able to get, like, people in like that, like things like Magic. They had like what Slipknot at one point. They had Nickelodeon even able to give like rights and stuff like that. Like so, like I think that's actually pretty cool. So that's just besides the point. But so anyway, that's just me. So all right, so yeah, so this is chapter 1. This is called the Bright Sword. Surtr stirred from his fugue, straightening at his eternal post. His charred fingers unconsciously tightened about the hilt of his bright blade. A pulse of what might have been anticipation flooded him. Something had changed. He turned slowly, surveying the ruins that served as his camp. Broken towers and shattered pillars were all that remained of this place. On the frontier of Olympus, where gentle lands of the south became thick jungle and rough ground. Beneath his feet, the ground was soft and bubbling. His presence made even the hardest stones as mud. His heat haze drifted across his vision, his felt bite of the goddess's sword, the sting of arrows. 100 deaths passed before his eyes. He lived, but he was dead. For what sort of life was this? It had been different once. Had he been a king? A hero at least, he thought? A savior to his people? But where were they? Why was he here, rather than with them? Surtr shook his head, banishing the thoughts before they overwhelmed him. Everything before he had come here was as a dream. For as long as he could recall, he had been trapped in this ruin, like all monsters. He was bound by chains of magic and fate. Yet now, he felt them barely at all. Indeed, as if he had felt he could simply step into the jungle. He could return home, if he wished. Something had changed. He could not say what this change might be, only that it teased his senses. Excuse me. Like a scent he remembered, but only dimly. The echo of a taste, or a glimpse of something familiar, but only at a great distance. He looked up, past the smoky clouds of ash that wreathed him, to where the heavens revolved in their eternal dance. Something was different. It was not as he recalled. Not quite. The stars above seemed brighter than he would when he last looked. Excuse me. How long ago now? A century? Two? It was a hard. It was hard to recall how long he'd stood watch in this place. He looked up again to make certain there was no mistake. He had always loved the stars. Pinpricks of flame straining against the chill of the void, much like himself. Unconsciously, he reached up, as if to kindle them to a greater brightness, but they were too far away, and it was not yet time. But wasn't it? He paused, gripped by a sudden bewilderment. Had it not happened already? Had Jormungandr not risen from the depths? Had the world not burned? It had, he was sure. But if so, why did he still stand sentry here? He groaned and gripped his head with a free hand. It ached as if he had been struck by Mjolnir. He felt full of strength, as if he had woken from a deep sleep. But that was impossible, for he didn't sleep. He was the eternal watchman, there to guard against. Take him! The words caused him to look up, just in time to see a sword slashing down towards his head. He twitched aside, barely avoiding it. Sorry, I lost my place. My giving somebody entertained. Alright, so take him. The words caused him to look up just in time to see a sword slashing down towards his head. He twitched aside, barely avoiding it. His attacker, a man, a god in golden armor, cursed and sprang back as Surtr lashed out at him. You missed, Gilgamesh, someone called out. He usually isn't that quick, Gilgamesh protested. Gilgamesh. That name was familiar. He was not alone, Surtr saw. Other gods accompanied him. He knew them all, though he could not recall ever faced them before. Bellona, Anubis, Ishtar, and Tsukuyomi. With Gilgamesh, they made 5. Is this the great fire giant then? Ishtar asked, notching an arrow. From your stories, I expected him to be bigger. I had only agreed to join you because you promised me a challenge, Bellona. He's big enough to be dangerous, Bellona said sternly. She was the leader. Then Surtr wanted to laugh, to spit a challenge in their faces, but he didn't. Couldn't. What was the point? It was no longer defiance that drove him, but resignation. The fire burned because it must. He would fight because he had no choice. It was his duty. His life was death. Eon after eon, he stood, fought, died, a plaything of his enemies, of those who had once feared him. Take no chances, Anubis growled. He could only destroy our world if he is allowed. Yet the world doesn't concern me, but glory does. Tsukuyomi spat, circling around us with predatory intent. The others followed suit, fanning out to encircle Surtr. Surtr glared at them, snarling a challenge. He knew what this was, and the familiarity brought with it a rush of anger. The cycle was always the same. 5 gods sent to test him, to beat him, to hold back the cleansing fire, even as it threatened to rise up and raze across the world. He had been on the cusp of awakening, and they had sent him back to his eternal reverie, back into oblivion that marked the cursed cycle of his existence. He knew that he had never been victorious against them, that his fire remained unkindled, despite millennia of striving, again and again. They defeated him. Sometimes they represented one pantheon, sometimes many. The Norse knew him and had once feared him, but so too had the other gods. His was a fire that would engulf the world, not just the lands of the Aesir and the Vanir. Thus, they had broken and bound him with great magics, trapped him here, away from the glory of his kingdom. They had separated from his people. How much more was he doomed to suffer? It all came roaring back to him as he blocked the slash from Gilgamesh's sword, forcing him to leap back. Memories of past battles, past defeats, rose up, threatening to overwhelm him. But how many cycles had passed since he came here? He marched north, his people following in his wake. They were in world's reckoning, coming to burn it clean so something new might arise from the ashes. But he had been prevented from doing so. Something, someone, had driven his people back and trapped him here. Odin, perhaps. Maybe all of them. One god would not have been enough, but now he can barely match 5. He reeled as blow after blow connected. Arrows, blades, magic, carving pieces from him as if they were nothing more than a sacrificial bull. A monument to the power of the pantheons. Was this what the mighty Surtr had been reduced to? He sank down to one knee. He was nothing. They were going to defeat him. They always defeated him. The fire was always snuffed out before it became too dangerous. That was the cycle the gods had yoked him to. But as he shook his head to clear it, the world seemed slow about him. He saw them closing in for the kill, hoping to humble him as others had before them. The heat of his anger redoubled, turned white hot. No more. Keep him hemmed in, Bellona called out. Make it hard for him to use that sword, Ishtar. Keep him covered. Gilgamesh, wait for an opening. Anubis. Don't think you to command me, Roman, Anubis said, as a green light crackled about his hands. I fought this battle before. We all have. Surtr awakes, and we put him back to sleep for another turn of the wheel. That is the way of it. By all means, show us how it's done, Tsukiyomi said. Hit him with your magics again. See if that works. Anubis growled and lightning sparked from his eyes. I will. He began, but Surtr interrupted him. No more, he hissed. The gods looked at Surtr in some surprise. He forced himself to his feet. No more, he repeated. As if there was a signal that they sprang into an action. Bellona was the first to come to him. As it was to be expected, she leapt, aiming for his head. Her strike was precise. Under different circumstances, it would have connected and the cycle would have begun again. But here and now, Surtr caught Bellona's weapon in the palm of his hand, a clench of his fist, and it was shattered. Bellona landed at his feet in a crouch, her expression one of bewilderment. The others joined the attack, but his anger was burning brightly now, and he shrugged off their attacks. He felt more alive than he had in centuries. Magics clawed at Surtr, dragging him into the ground. Anubis growled something about judgment, as if they were fit to judge him. Was he not a harbinger of the end? Had it been the blade that meant to kindle the last conflagration, the bright sword, the great fire? He could feel its heat, just at the edge of its perceptions. He stretched out his hand, reaching for it, even as Anubis launched a salvo of deathly magics. And something changed. He changed. He felt something of his old strength flood into him, and shrugged aside the magics that bound him. He was not as he had been, but he was more than what the gods had condemned him to be. Enough, perhaps, to remind them of why they had once feared him. As the haze of his transformation faded, he charged towards his tormentors. Bellona leapt aside as Surtr bore down on Anubis. He caught the jackal-headed god by the throat and dragged him into the air with ease. He hurled Anubis aside as if he were nothing, and spun to block Bellona's blow. The others converged on him, hoping to catch him unaware. Earlier, they would have succeeded, but now he simply laughed and let loose the fire building inside him. It roared out and sent attackers flying like leaves in a hot wind. In the silence that followed, he looked down at the gods fallen at his feet and felt an inexplicable rush of joy. I won! He rumbled in disbelief. Laughing, he threw his head back. I won! His cry of triumph was interrupted by the rumble of stars overhead. He looked up in confusion. What had seemed so beautiful only moments ago seemed hostile, cold, as if they were glaring down at him. I won, he snarled in his eyes on the stars. I will burn the world. That is how it must be. You cannot stop me now. The cycle is ended. At last, after all your tricks, it is done. The stars were not listening. You heard the thunder of hooves and the clash of cymbals. The ground shook, and the fires of Muspel dimmed. More gods were coming, not simply champions now, but the leaders of great pantheons, all racing towards him as one, towards the land of his people, Odin and Zeus. In the vanguard, Yu Huang and Kokukan from the east and west, the great Rama, Rise Ra, and blazing Amaterasu, and from above, from amid the treacherous stars, Oleron, ruler of the heavens. They were coming to stamp him out before he could fulfill his sacred duty. He hesitated. Uncertain for the first time in centuries, the old rules were broken. He had won. He had every right to call on the sons of Muspel to war again, to meet the invaders in battle and pick up where he had left off. As part of him wanted nothing more to see such an inferno blossom. But they would lose. He knew it, as surely as he knew the victory was unexpected. That the gods were racing to stop him before he could even begun told him that much. Where were his ancient allies? Where was Jormungandr, Fenrir? Without their strength, he was outmatched. The gods would simply overwhelm him as they had before, and his people would suffer in his triumph. He could not bear that. Surtr raised his sword. My life is death, he rumbled. But this is not where I fall. It was not a challenge, simply a promise. But for now, there was only one option available for him. Surtr fled. Wow, good on the Surtr, man. Got tired of taking everybody's guff, that's what it was. But that one was actually really good. I like that one. Guys have to tell me what you guys think. But for now, this is where I'll leave you guys for now. Hope you guys all have a good one. Thank you for watching. This has been your Smite Lore reading of your day.